Hey, I'm Nancy Cavey, National ERISA and Individual Disability Attorney. Welcome to Winning Isn't Easy. Before we get started, I've got to give you a legal disclaimer. This podcast isn't legal advice. The Florida Bar Association says I've got to say this. So now that I've said it, I'll tell you nothing will ever prevent me from giving you an easy to understand overview of the disability insurance world, the games that disability carriers play, and what you need to know to get the disability benefits you deserve. So off we go. Do you have chronic fatigue syndrome? Well, this episode is for you. If you don't, I think there's still some takeaways to learn from. We've talked about this disease before, but I think there's so much more to discuss, especially in relation to disability insurance claims. I decided I'd just do another episode, and we're going to talk about 4 things today. Number 1, what type of doctor does the long-term disability carrier expect you to treat with if you have chronic fatigue syndrome? 2, what are the 2 things that you should be tracking in your chronic fatigue diary to win your claim? 3, what shouldn't you track in your claim? And 4th, why you should have a CPET test if you're applying for your long-term disability benefits because of chronic fatigue syndrome. Let's take a break for a moment before we get started with this week's episode. Welcome back to Winning Isn't Easy. What shouldn't you track in your daily or weekly schedule in your chronic fatigue disability insurance claim? I'll tell you, disability insurance carriers demand all sorts of proof in chronic fatigue syndrome cases. You've got the burden to prove you're disabled, as that term is defined in your disability policy or plan. Now, one of the things that the disability carrier is going to demand is objective evidence of your restrictions and limitations. The issue is, what are your symptoms and how do those symptoms impact your ability to perform the material and substantial duties of your own occupation or any occupation? Now, I think that can be hard to prove without a functional capacity test or a CPET test. One of the most important tools that can be an adjunct to this is a chronic fatigue syndrome diary. The diary is going to help your doctor render an opinion about the restrictions and limitations that prevent you from doing your occupational duties. In other words, it can help explain the nature of your symptoms, how those symptoms impact your ability to work, and document relapses. Now, I know that you might be tempted to supplement this with a daily or a weekly schedule log and submit it to the carrier as proof as to why you can't work a full day or a full week. And I actually think that's a bad idea. Why shouldn't you track your daily or weekly schedule in your chronic fatigue claim? As I've said before, keeping a diary can help you and it can hurt you if you say the wrong thing. The doctor is going to be relying on that diary and rendering opinions about you, and it has to document things in the right way. And it's got to be consistent with your activity of daily living forms. Now, often your daily and your weekly activity is going to vary based on your symptoms and your activity level. There may not be a rhyme, there may not be a reason to your daily or weekly schedule. You might have one good day, then one bad day, or a cluster of bad days, or a cluster of good days. Disability carriers see daily or weekly schedule logs as a golden opportunity to assign surveillance and to cherry pick the diary or the logs. Now, one of the things they're going to do is they're going to want to take your statement, looking for any inconsistencies in your medical records, your activity of daily living forms, and your logs. These inconsistencies are a perfect setup for surveillance, and they love to deny claims on the basis that there's an inconsistency between your symptoms and your functionality as reported in your medical records and in your diary, and ultimately any surveillance that they might get on you. Now, these inconsistencies are that very setup for surveillance, and what they're looking for is your social media postings, your report of activity to your doctors, and your logs, and they're going to try to get you on film. Now, the problem, of course, is that your symptoms may vary day to day, week to week, based on activity. And if the disability carrier sees a pattern in your documents, or sees a string of good days, they're potentially just going to seize on that slice of your activities, your social media posts, um, your doctor's reports, and try to create the impression that you're a liar. The reason they're going to do that is they're going to go back to the doctor and say, look, doctor, you relied on these documents that were given to you by your patient. You relied on the history. But doctor, if that history is inconsistent, if we've got film showing them doing something that's inconsistent, would you agree with us that your opinions about the restrictions and limitations, about their ability to work, is wrong? And doctors will rarely say, well, I really want to take a look at this stuff and analyze it, because they don't have time. And what will happen is that the doctors will let the disability carrier paint you as a liar, a fraud, or even worse, a malingerer. So I really don't want you to be creating and submitting any kind of daily or weekly activity diary and submitting it to your disability carrier. I think just a simple diary, as I've discussed in earlier episodes, is appropriate, but giving too much detailed information can be a disaster. Let's talk about the one test that you should get that can make or break your chronic fatigue syndrome case. Let's take a break.